October 5th, 1923. To whom it may concern, my thoughts just before the first real college game of my life. The honor of my race, family, and self are at stake. Everyone is expecting me to do big things. I will.
Jack Trice was Iowa State's first African-American player, and his legacy stems from a single game with the Cyclones. Trice was one of only a handful of black players at predominantly white institutions in the 1920s.
He had a lot of things resting on his shoulders. Not being able to ride in the same train car, not being able to be in the same hotel. So you have this young man realizing what he's doing is bigger and more than football.
Trice was not allowed to join his teammates for dinner the night before his first real game. Instead, he remained in his room and wrote himself a letter. Trice vowed that he would give his all in the upcoming game.
My whole body and soul are to be thrown recklessly about on the field tomorrow. Every time the ball is snapped, I'll be trying to do more than my part.
He knew in his heart and soul, probably as a black man, if he failed, there wouldn't be an opportunities for others. And I believe that.
Beware of mass interference. Fight low with your eyes open and toward the play. Roll block the interference.
On October 6, 1923, in a game at the University of Minnesota, Trice, who had broken his collarbone earlier in the game, threw his body at 3 Minnesota linemen who were attempting to run interference. The force of the collision put Trice on his back, where he was subsequently trampled as play continued.
As best as we can tell, a runner was following 2 blockers. Trice jumped in there, did a roll block to take out the blockers so his teammates could make the tackle. It was decided that Jack Trice could ride the train back to Iowa, which would be an overnight trip. He did that and then was immediately entered into what was then the Iowa State College Hospital.
2 days later, with his wife by his side, Trice died as a result of internal bleeding. He was 21. In the aftermath of Trice's death, the white sports media and university officials concluded that it was not racism, but the brutality of football that caused the injuries. Indeed, football was an extraordinarily brutal business. The game claimed 18 lives in 1923. For African Americans, football was an extension of the organized terrorism against blacks. As early as 1892, Michigan's George Jewett heard Purdue fans shout, "Kill the coon."
I can only ascertain, based upon everything that I've heard and read, that there was intent to harm. I cannot say that it was an intent to kill, but that obviously was the outcome.
No matter what the intent behind it was, you could say it was a legal play.
One of 3 things happened to Jack Trice in the Minnesota game. 1, he was targeted because he was the best Iowa State lineman and he was playing a heck of a game. Or 2, he was targeted because he was black and the only African American on the field. Or 3, it was simply an accident. But I'm not naive enough not to think it was racially motivated.
Trice's largely forgotten story was resurrected in the 1970s after a school official found a dusty, forgotten plaque in the gym years before and wrote a story about Trice's tragic gridiron death. A year later, the student government recommended that the newly constructed football stadium be named in Trice's honor. The university resisted. Finally, after 24 years of the battle, in 1997, the university relented. Cyclones Stadium became Jack Trice Stadium, the only FBS stadium named after an African-American athlete.
We were not a major push in the name change. We were kind of subtle. The students really drove it.
It was on every single student body president's set of priorities that they were not going to let this die.
The source of his legacy is the dignity with which he endured slights and the selflessness with which he played the game.
Hearing the Jack Trice story instantly made me feel a sense of responsibility to emulate the character that Jack stood for, the courage that Jack had.
somebody like that cannot be forgotten for the courageous acts that he went through to give people like me the opportunity to play.
It seems that African Americans somehow, when they go through tragedy, and we see this now with Breonna Taylor, we saw this with George Floyd, we saw this with Dr. Martin Luther King. I'm not real sure why in this country blacks reach humanity or some sense of full human capacity until there's a tragedy.
He played for honor and for his own unwavering sense of pride. 97 years after Trice's death, the stadium that bears his name is a reminder of a black life that mattered and an indomitable spirit that lives on.
Be on your toes every minute if you expect to make good. Jack.